Welcome back. Download the files for this lesson from the video description. We open folder 6 in VS Code and start discussing one of the most important properties in CSS, the display property. I open images.html in Live Server and add a paragraph. P greater than sign, lorem 10 and press Tab key. We observe that both the form and the paragraph we just added are displayed one above the other, while the rest of the elements above are displayed one after another. Well, this behavior is due to the CSS property display. The display property in CSS is indeed crucial as it determines how elements are displayed on the web page. It can be used to control the layout and visibility of elements. The display property can have several types of values. We are now discussing the first three. Block-level elements, which take up an entire line. Forms and paragraphs are block-level elements by default. A block-level element always starts on a new line, and browsers automatically add space, a margin, before and after the element. Inline block elements. These take up only as much space as they need, not the entire line. Examples we have on the page we are working on are the two images, the button, and the two checkboxes. Inline elements. Inline elements are great for when you want elements to flow within a line without breaking to a new line. They take up only the width necessary to fit their content. For example, elements that appear in a line of text, such as span or strong elements within a paragraph, or the label element. The most interesting of the three are block and inline block because they determine how elements are displayed on the page, either next to each other or on separate lines. With the help of the display property, we can alter the default behavior of an element. Let's change the block elements to inline block. I'll add another paragraph. P greater than sign, lorem 10 and press Tab key. We know that paragraphs are block elements. Well, we are going to change this. P display inline block. Let's have a little look in DevTools to understand better. As you can see, we can very easily transform block elements into inline block elements. Now we will try the opposite. We will place the two images on separate lines by adding display block to .img1 and .img2. Do you see how the other elements are pushed to a new line below the images? When you change the display property of the images to block, each image takes up the full width available, which pushes the next element to a new line below. Understanding the display property and how block, inline, and inline block elements behave is crucial for web development. These concepts form the foundation of how you structure and style your web pages, creating more complex and organized layouts. By mastering these basics, you'll have a solid grasp on how to manipulate elements on your page to achieve the desired layout and design. This knowledge will also help you troubleshoot and optimize your web pages, ensuring they look great and function smoothly across different devices and browsers. Now I am going to present to you a very commonly used HTML element, div tag. Div stands for division or document division. It's a generic container element used to group together other HTML elements. Developers often use it for styling or scripting purposes. It's an essential part of web development that helps to organize the structure of web pages. I have opened a page from a website, and I am going to show you how frequently the div tag is used. Right-click and choose the option View Page Source. This action allows you to see the underlying HTML code of the web page in your browser. By inspecting the source code, you can see the hierarchy of elements, their attributes, and how styles are applied. It's quite common to see a page filled with multiple div tags because they help organize content into sections, making it easier to style and manage. Try to imagine a large container in which we have stored all kinds of things. The div element is incredibly versatile and essential for web development. By grouping various elements like images, paragraphs, and more within a div, you can create well-organized, complex page structures. Let's open the textstyling.html file in the live server and add a div tag that wraps all the code, and then I'll show you what we can do. Let's add a div tag with the class.wrapper and then move all the code between the div tags. Now, I can style this entire block of code, add a background color, padding, and so on. .wrapper, background color, number sign, EFEFEF. Padding, 20 pixels. Width, 250 pixels. Border radius, 9 pixels. Let's move forward and create something similar to what we see in this image. We create a new file named index.html. In the world of web development, this is often the starting point or the default page of a website. When you type a website URL like example.com into your browser, it typically looks for a file named index.html in the site's root directory. If it finds one, it displays its content. In other words, index.html is like the homepage or the front door of many websites. We create a boilerplate and a CSS file, styles.css, and link the CSS file to the HTML file. We look closely at the image and try to create the same thing. We can see two boxes, and in each box, we have two images and some text. We will work from the outside in first building one of the boxes and then duplicating the code and making the necessary changes. We do this because the two boxes have the same structure, and we start creating the structure of divs in an orderly manner. Since we are now working on a specific component of the website, we'll follow best practices. We'll wrap the structure in an HTML5 sectioning element section. The sectioning elements were introduced in HTML5 in 2014 and are semantic elements, meaning they provide a clear and specific meaning about their role and content within the HTML document. Let's add a section element with the class NewModels. We will integrate this NewModels section into the web page alongside other sections. Then we have a nice big title, H2, greater than sign, lorem 6. And now let's add the large container that will wrap the entire structure. In our case, it will wrap the two images. A div with the class products wrapper. Let's add a smaller container for a single image, another div with the class product container. Now we will create another div inside the container to insert the image of the first product. Div with class product image. We need this type of structure to create the layout of this section. When I say layout, I mean the appearance of the page or the arrangement of elements on the page. CSS layout techniques allow us to control where elements are positioned on the page in relation to a series of factors. Their default position in the normal flow, the other elements around them, the parent container, and the main viewport, let's call it the HTML container. There are various techniques and CSS properties to create complex and responsive layouts, as you can see later. Let's pop in our image. We already know how to insert an image. Type img with the class thumbnail and press Tab key. The images are in the Product Images folder, which is in the Images folder. I'll start with blouse b8.png. For the alt attribute, we won't write anything for now. We'll talk about it later when we handle search engine optimization for the website. Now we will add another container for the two remaining elements, the price and the product name. A div with the class product desk. Now we can put the price image in its own container. Later, we'll change the images to text for the prices, because that's how it should be done. For now, we'll use images to learn from different situations. Let's add a div with class product price. Inside this div, we insert the price image. img with the class price and press the Tab key. In the src attribute, I insert the path to the image, images / product images / price-blouse-b8.png. And finally, the last div, which will contain two paragraphs, we insert it under the div with the class product price. Div.productinfo and press the Tab key. Then, inside this div, I insert the two paragraphs. A paragraph with the class product name. And one with the class product status. For the paragraph with the class product name, we enter the product name, ladies blouse, code B8. And for the paragraph with product status class, we provide information about the product's availability. The product is in stock. Now I will copy all the code from product container because I want to add another product. We make the necessary modifications, change the name of the image, and add the corresponding price. And that's it. Brilliant. You can see that we already have nested div elements in a fairly complex tree structure, and I'm going to tell you a bit about the relationships between HTML elements on the page. I think it's a good time to explain a bit about CSS combinators. The idea is that a CSS selector can contain more than just a simple selector. Between simple selectors, we can include a combinator. There are 4 different combinators in CSS: descendant selector, child selector, adjacent sibling selector, general sibling selector. These combinators help define relationships between elements in CSS, making it possible to apply styles based on the structure of the HTML. Let's take them one by one. We open combinators.html, where I have already prepared a series of examples, and we start with the first one. Let's take a look at the HTML structure to see what it looks like. We see a container with the class demo that contains multiple elements: an H2 title, 2 paragraphs, a span element, and 2 links. Outside of this container, there are 2 more paragraphs, a div with a paragraph inside and again 1 paragraph. Descendant selector. The descendant selector targets only the elements that are descendants of a specified element. Basically, we first mention the parent element, leave a space, and then mention one of the descendants of the first element. In our example, div class equals demo is the parent element, while all the elements inside are the child elements. We notice that the paragraphs outside the div remains unchanged. Child selector. The child selector, also known as the direct descendant, selects only the direct children of the parent. Adjacent sibling selector. The general sibling combinator selects siblings. We can specify the first element and a second one that comes after the first, but not necessarily immediately after it. The div has several paragraph elements nested inside it. They are its children. There are also 3 paragraphs outside the container. In our structure, all these 3 elements are siblings with the first div element. General sibling selector. The general sibling selector is more specific. This selector targets only immediate siblings. Immediate siblings are those that come right after the first element. Okay, break's over. Let's get back to our little project and start adding some CSS rules. First, we'll visit Google Fonts again to choose a font, and this time I'll show you another method of embedding it directly into the CSS file. We search for the Open Sans font and will insert the font directly into the CSS file. The add import rule is used to import style rules from other valid style sheets. An @import rule must be defined at the top of the style sheet before any other rules, except for at charset and at layer, otherwise it will be ignored. I will also add charset at charset UTF-8, which is a directive used to specify the character set used in the CSS file. This helps the browser interpret the CSS file correctly, especially when it contains special characters or symbols from other languages. Let's start styling the two products. I'm going to start styling the two images by targeting the thumbnail class. Width, 250 pixels. Display, block. I would like the two images to be side by side and not one below the other. To achieve this, I will target the main container, product container. Width, 300 pixels. Display, inline block. We need to do something with the images of the two prices that are too large. I will force the product price image to occupy a width of 50 pixels. Price, width, 50 pixels. Border, 2 pixels, solid, black. Now we need to ensure that the price and the two paragraphs are on the same line. I will target the product price class. Display, inline block. Width, 50 pixels. Since I have set the container holding the price image to 50 pixels, I can set the image to 100% because that is correct, meaning 100% of the container width, which is 50 pixels. I'll add a width of 100% for the price class. Next, we target the container that holds the two paragraphs with the class product info. Product info. Display, inline block. Width, 200 pixels. For the two paragraphs, I will set the imported font and reset the top and bottom margins that are default for paragraph tags. This way the price and product name will align more or less horizontally. I'll add this rule at the very top. Font family, Open Sans, Arial, Sans Serif. Margin top, 0. Margin bottom, 0. And I want the price to be aligned with the paragraphs at the top, so I will add vertical line, top, for the product price class. Now I will add a margin to the bottom of the images of the two blouse models, because the text is too close. Product image. Margin bottom, 12 pixels. And let's continue with the two paragraphs, because I want them to look different. First, the product name. Font size, 14 pixels. Font weight, 500. Line height, 20 pixels. Margin bottom, 4 pixels. Now the second paragraph, product status. Font size, 12 pixels. Color RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.6. Line height is a CSS property that controls the amount of space between lines of text. It's a crucial element in web design and typography because it affects the readability and overall aesthetic of the text on a web page. Here are some key points about line height. Line height can be set using various units. Number, a unitless value that acts as a multiplier of the font size. For example, line height 1.5 means 1.5 times the font size. Percentage relative to the font size. For example, line height 150% means 150% of the font size. Length using units like pixels or rem. For example, line height 20 pixels or line height 1.2 m. Line height affects inline elements like text and images, which can help with vertical alignment issues, such as when an image has extra space around it. Well, in this lesson, I started to show you how to create nested, more complex layouts. But before we finish, I want to show and explain a few things that are not visible. I will add a background color for the two columns, the one containing the price, .product price, and the column with the two paragraphs, .product info. Background color, number sign, D3D3D3. Now it can clearly be seen that there is an alignment issue. There is a space between the two columns. The large container, .product container, is 300 pixels. The column containing the product price has a width of 50 pixels. The column containing the two paragraphs is 200 pixels. If we set this to 250 pixels, theoretically it should occupy all the available space, that is, 300 pixels, and everything should be fine, correct? Let's see. It's not like that. The column with the paragraphs drops to the next line. What I'll do, change it to 247. Try maybe 246 pixels. So, we are missing about 4 pixels in the inventory. This is a vertical alignment issue, a limitation when working with inline block. But where does that free space come from? Well, in HTML code, if there are multiple spaces, they are condensed into one, and this interferes with the page design. If we remove the free spaces from the code, we solve the problem, but our code will be very hard to read. This way of working is not feasible. In the next lesson, we will solve this problem because we will use another type of layout called CSS grid. I also notice another issue. The border we set around the price exceeds the container it is in. We say it overflows. We have the option to eliminate the overflow using overflowX, hidden, but that's still not good enough. Well, we know that images are inline elements. All inline elements are affected by the line height property. Likewise, images have a default line height value, and this value includes some vertical free space. When we change inline block to block, the line height property no longer applies and the problem disappears. Price, display, block. Regarding the border, we have two options. Either we give it up, or we use a property created specifically for such situations, which does not solve the problem in reality but only cosmetically, namely, the box sizing property with the border box value. In short, the CSS box model we talked about earlier is not perfect. It is still improvable. In fact, we could call it the rectangle model because it is not a model that works three-dimensionally like a real box. Surely you will understand better over time as you gain experience and try new layouts. Practically, when the box size is calculated, the border is not taken into account, which is why it exceeds the container, it overflows. Box sizing, border box, says that the size of the box must include the border. It is forced to include the border. I will remove box sizing, border box. Finally, we go to .product name, to the two paragraphs, to tell you something else about line height. It has a value of 20 pixels. What I'll do, change it to line height 0. Is it clear, yes? Very good. We eliminate it completely, and everything seems to be fine, right? Practically, we could say it's redundant and better to remove it completely. Well, it's not quite like that. Browser-style sheets have a default value for line height, and this is 1.2. That is, 1.2 times 16 pixels equals 19.2 pixels, where 16 pixels is the default font size. Line height is directly related to font size as I mentioned earlier. If I do not set a value for line height, it will be 1.2 times 14 pixels, because we set a font size of 14 pixels, which overrides the default 16 pixels, so 1.2 times 14 is equal to 16.8 pixels. Let me show you in the Dev Tools. So, I will stick with the value I set of 20 pixels, and what you need to understand is that we use certain properties to have complete control over the design, the layout we are working on. Practically, we reset the default values and come up with other values that suit us in a specific context. We have just concluded Lesson 6. Now, it's essential to review and practice what you've learned. Ensure you fully grasp the material. If you have any doubts, don't hesitate to ask for help. Regular practice will strengthen your skills and confidence. Don't move forward if you haven't fully understood something. Each lesson is a building block for your future success. Happy coding!